Tucked away in a hidden corner of the Atlanta suburbs inside a shabby rundown diner, a young black woman was doing it all. She was the owner, the server, and the janitor. She worked alone 12 grueling hours a day, scraping together every penny for a college dream she had been forced to put on hold. But the harsh reality was that she was barely making enough to survive. She thought her life would forever be defined by stacks of dirty dishes and the stench of grease. Until one day, a little beggar girl appeared, her skin turning purple from the biting cold. She didn't dare step inside. She just stood there, inhaling the aroma of hot soup, drifting out, trying to trick her empty, rumbling stomach. Without hesitation, the owner stepped out carrying a bowl of steaming hot soup, free of charge. But instead of eating, the little girl asked for a plastic bag. She wanted to take it home to her mother, who was lying at home waiting to die. The owner didn't know it yet, but that small act of kindness would turn out to be the most profitable deal of her entire life. Before we get back to the story, let us know where you are watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow I have a special surprise just for you. The unfiltered gray light of an Atlanta dawn struggled to pierce through the thick dust dancing in the air. Inside the skeletal remains of a once grand suburban apartment complex, silence hung heavy and suffocating like a leaden blanket. In a dark corner of the ruins, a thin mattress lay directly on the dirt floor. Upon it, a black woman labored for every difficult breath. Her name was Gloria Johnson. She was only 28, but illness had robbed her of her youth, making her look much older than her true age. Her black skin was now ashen and lifeless, her lips frequently tinged purple from a lack of oxygen. Lying beside Gloria was a little girl. Maya Johnson was only 6 tiny and frail, her curly black hair tied in 2 small pigtails that had become frizzed and tangled from days of neglect. That morning, as the first light of dawn flickered through a crack in the wall, Maya woke up. She didn't stretch, and she didn't rub her eyes like other normal children. Instead, the first thing she did was gently press her ear against her mother's chest. Maya held her breath, listening. 1 beat, 2 beats, 3 beats. She counted silently in her head, her own heart pounding with anxiety. Only when she reached 60 steady beats did her face relax, a fleeting smile of relief crossing her lips. "Mom is still okay," Maya whispered to herself. Her heart is still beating evenly. This 6-year-old girl had learned to do this since she was 4, ever since the day her mother fainted for the first time right in front of her. That day, Maya had been so terrified she didn't know what to do. She had cried trying to shake her mother awake, but her mother wouldn't wake up. Since then, she taught herself to check her mother's heart every morning, every night, and whenever she felt worried. Maya sat up, looking at her mother, who was still sleeping. She looked down at her own stomach, feeling the familiar gnawing hunger. Then she looked over at her mother, at the pale face, at the skeletal frame beneath the thin blanket. "I have to find food today," Maya whispered. "Mom needs to eat to have strength. She can't go hungry anymore." She stood up, stepping lightly so as not to wake her mother. Before leaving, she spotted an old coat lying in the corner of the room, the only coat the two of them owned. Maya picked it up, looked at her mother, and then gently tucked it over Gloria's chest. That morning was chilly, and the girl herself was wearing only a thin dress. But Maya didn't think about that. She only thought that her mother needed the warmth more than she did. Just as Maya was preparing to step outside, a weak voice rang out. "Maya!" The girl turned back immediately. Gloria had opened her eyes and was trying to force herself up, but as soon as she lifted her body, a sharp pain in her chest forced her to lie back down, her face twisting in agony. "Mom!" Maya ran to her, kneeling beside the bed, her eyes full of worry. "Does it hurt? Don't try to get up. Breathe slowly. In, out, in, out." Gloria followed her daughter's instructions, inhaling a slow breath, then exhaling. The pain gradually subsided. She looked at her daughter, tears ready to spill. The child was only 6 years old, but she had to care for her mother like an adult. Gloria felt her heart ache not because of the disease, but because of guilt. She had failed to give her child a better life. "Come here with me," Gloria said, her voice breathless. Maya took her mother's hand, her tiny warm hand grasping Gloria's cold one. Gloria squeezed her child's hand gently. "Where are you planning to go?" "I'm going to find food for you," Maya replied, her voice calm, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. Gloria wanted to say, "Don't go, let me go, I will take care of it," but she knew she couldn't. She didn't have enough strength to stand up, let alone walk out the door. Her body had betrayed her long ago. "You remember to be careful," Gloria said, her voice trembling. "Don't go too far. If you feel tired, come home immediately with Mom. Don't talk to strangers. And if anyone gives you a hard time, just walk away. Don't argue back." Maya nodded, trying to bloom a reassuring smile. "I know, Mom. I'll be home soon. You lie still and rest. Don't try to get up. If you find it hard to breathe, remember to lie on your left side like the doctor said." Gloria nodded, her eyes blurring with tears. Her daughter, 6 years old, was instructing her like an adult instructing a child. This world had forced the little girl to grow up too soon. Before leaving, Maya bowed down to kiss her mother's forehead. Then she pressed her ear to her mother's chest one more time, listening to the steady heartbeat. 1 beat, 2 beats, 3 beats. Still okay. She exhaled a sigh of relief, stood up, and walked out. Just as she stepped out of the building's shadow, the sudden sunlight of Atlanta glared straight into her eyes, making the little girl dizzy. She gently raised her tiny hand to shield her forehead, squinting her dark black eyes. She began to skip. Her skipping stopped right at the heels of a pair of shiny red high heels. The little girl looked up at the woman, her dark eyes sparkling with hope like 2 little stars. She ran busily alongside, trying to keep up with the hurried pace of the giant, who was engrossed in the blue screen in her hand. "Ma'am." The girl's voice was clear and soft like a baby bird. My mom just needs a little hot soup. She is waiting for me at home." The woman didn't blink once. She slightly dodged her body, a very subtle dodge, as if she had just avoided an inanimate obstacle on the road. The little girl stood frozen, her tiny hand still outstretched in the middle of the air, lost. She watched that back dissolve into the stream of people, gently pursed her lips, and reassured herself with a long sigh. She must be busy. Maybe her headphones were too loud so she didn't hear me. The little girl continued to walk, but her skipping had begun to feel heavier. Arriving at a bus stop, she saw a muscular man. She approached, but this time she didn't dare touch his crisp sleeve. She only stood an arm's length away timidly. "Sir, I'm so hungry. I just need $1 to buy medicine for my mom." A gaze looked down, but it was not sympathy. He took a long step back, his face twisting as if he had just seen a pile of rotting, stinking garbage. "Get away from me!" The shout was like a slap from the sky in the middle of the crowded street. "Go wash with soap before you open your mouth. Professional beggars get lost before I call the police to chain you up." The little girl flinched, her small shoulders trembling violently. The people around began to turn and look, but not to protect. They were eyes of judgment and discrimination. She hurriedly lowered her head, her dirt-stained hands clutching tightly to the hem of her floral dress. "I'm not dirty. I just haven't had time to wash my hands yet." She suppressed a choking sob deep into the bottom of her heart. 4 hours passed. The city began to light up, brilliant and magnificent, but the girl's empty stomach began to cramp with spasms of pain. Maya entered a park, sitting swallowed up by the cold wooden bench. She opened her palms. Empty. There were only calluses and dust. "Nothing yet, Maya," she said to herself, her voice trembling under the yellow street lamp. 1,000 heartbeats. Mom must have finished counting long ago. If I go back empty-handed, Mom will ask, "Are you hungry?" How do I answer? She looked down at her plastic sandals worn through at the heels. A hot tear finally fell, blurring on the concrete surface. Just then, the sound of laughter rang out from a distance. Maya opened her eyes, looking in that direction. A group of 3 children was walking through the park. They were about 8 or 9 years old, dressed beautifully in clean clothes and expensive sneakers. Their hands held colorful ice cream and pastries, laughing and talking as they walked. Maya looked at the cakes in their hands, her stomach boiling with hunger. She swallowed a gulp of saliva, then lowered her head, trying hard not to look anymore. But one of the children had seen her. "Hey, look," that kid said loudly, pointing at Maya. "The beggar girl." The whole group stopped, turning to look at Maya. They approached, their eyes carrying a look of curiosity mixed with contempt. "Oh my God, so dirty." The second one grimaced. "Look at her clothes. Probably hasn't showered in a month. She probably lives in a trash can." The third laughed sneeringly. "That's why she smells like that." Maya said nothing. Her teeth clenched tight together, eyes staring fixedly at her own stained hands. She told herself she just needed to be silent. They would get bored and leave. Just be patient a little longer. But they didn't leave. The leader looked at the piece of cake in his hand, then looked at Maya with malicious eyes. He dangled the piece of cake in front of the girl's face. I bet you're hungry." The scent of butter and cocoa wrapped around the tip of Maya's nose. In that second, there was a moment when primal instinct overrode the shame of being humiliated. If she could get that piece of cake, then tonight, her mother wouldn't have to suffer hunger. Cutting through her train of thought, the boy threw the piece of cake onto the ground. But he didn't just throw it. He used the heel of his shoe to grind down hard on it, crushing the pastry crumbs into the sand, cigarette butts, and dirty trash on the walkway. "There, eat it, beggar dog." The group shrieked with laughter, as if they had just heard the best joke in the world. Then they started throwing other things: candy wrappers, cake packaging, small stones picked up from the ground. Maya sat perfectly still as a stone hit her shoulder and a candy wrapper stuck to her hair. She didn't fight back. She only waited until their laughter faded into the distance when they got bored of this game. When the park returned to silence, Maya slowly slid off the bench. Her gaunt knees knelt down on the dirty ground. She looked at the deformed piece of cake full of sand and black mud. A wave of nausea rolled up in her throat. "You're going to pick this up. It's trash. They just stepped on it like they stepped on you." But then the image of her mother lying, gasping for air. The sound of the weak heartbeat in the dark room appeared. Maya gritted her teeth, her trembling hands reaching out. She picked up every single crumb, carefully, cherishingly, as if they were the most precious diamonds in the world. Then, using the hem of her faded dress, she meticulously wiped away the layer of black mud, gently blowing off the grains of sand clinging tight to the texture of the cake. "It's okay. It's just a little dust," she whispered to herself, her voice hoarse. "Wipe it, and it's clean. Mom won't know." She took out a relatively clean old tissue wrapping, that treasure up like a priceless gift. When she stuffed it deep into her pocket, she patted it twice. "I thank you, God." She raised her eyes to look up at the old tree canopy, her lips trembling violently. "You didn't abandon us. At least, tonight. Mom won't have to starve anymore. I'm sorry for not bringing back anything better, but I thank you." Maya didn't stand up immediately. She sat back on the bench, her empty eyes looking down at her bare feet. A small ant was crawling across her toe. Maya looked at it, then whispered softly, "You're so small, but you're even stronger than me. You don't know how to feel heartbroken, right?" The little girl took a very deep breath. Then she stood up, dusted off her dress, and walked away. The 6-year-old girl didn't know that her life was about to change forever, because somewhere in this city there was a woman who would see her, a woman who would not turn her face away. The wind howls through the cracks in the broken window, creating a haunting sound that mixes with the relentless slapping of a plastic tarp against the brick wall. Gloria lies curled on a thin mattress. The cold seeps deep into her bones, but it isn't nearly as cold as the memories replaying in her head. Memories of a man with eyes just like Maya's, the man who walked away from them both. The library back then was so peaceful. She can still feel the warmth of David's hand against her frail chest. His voice was deep and steady like a solemn vow. "Gloria, trust me. I'll work. I'll make enough money to buy you a new heart." That promise was so sweet that she believed it blindly. She truly believed fairy tales were real. Then came the acceptance letter for a master's scholarship abroad. It looked like a miracle, but it was actually the end of their love. She used the money her parents had left for her own medical treatment to pay for David's education. She turned it into a grand lie. "I still have insurance and my parents' savings. I'll be healthy until you come back to marry me. Just go." She smiled radiantly so he could leave with a peaceful heart, hiding the fact that she was down to her last few painkillers. She had sacrificed her own life to buy him a future. And what did she get in return? Silence. The sweet phone calls of the first few weeks were quickly replaced by an endless dial tone. 1 missed call, 10, 100. Gloria hugged her cold phone every night, waiting for an explanation. But there was nothing. He vanished like a soap bubble, leaving her drowning in a sea of despair while her belly grew. She was pregnant with David's child. "Abort the pregnancy, or you will die." The doctor's words were as cold as a death sentence. But the moment she felt that tiny life kick inside her, Gloria wiped away her tears. She looked at the doctor with the fierce gaze of a mother protecting her cub. "I don't need to live, but my child must be born. This baby is everything he left behind." Maya was born to the sound of heart monitor alarms. She grew up watching her mother struggle for every breath. The breaking point came on a scorching afternoon. Gloria collapsed on the burning asphalt like a rotting tree. Everything went dark. "Mommy, wake up, don't sleep." The heart-shattering screams of 4-year-old Maya haunt her to this day. In that moment, her daughter's childhood ended forever. Maya was no longer just a child. She became the unwilling guardian of her dying mother. Tears silently roll down Gloria's pillow. She hates David for leaving, but she hates herself even more for being unable to give Maya a normal life. Over the next 2 years, everything fell apart like a row of dominoes. Gloria lost the strength to work. She could no longer even stand. Their savings vanished, and rent went unpaid for months. One freezing rainy night, the landlord heartlessly threw all their belongings onto the street. They wandered for days and nights, sleeping on windy park benches, under damp bridges, or in any dark corner that offered a bit of shelter. Finally, they found it, a dark corner in an abandoned building. It wasn't much, but at least it had a roof. Gloria cleaned a small space, laying an old mattress salvaged from a dumpster onto the freezing concrete floor. She called it home. Watching her 6-year-old daughter use a scrap of wood to sweep away the thick dust, Gloria's heart shattered. "I'm sorry, Maya," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I brought you into this miserable life." Just a 20-minute walk away sat a tiny diner tucked into a quiet street corner. The sign was so faded you couldn't even read the name anymore. The owner, Amara Williams, was 25 years old. Her beauty was hidden behind a stained apron and hair tied back in a ruche. Her hands were rough, covered in calluses and burns. The brutal marks of working from 4 in the morning until midnight, every single day, without rest. Amara did everything herself. The shopping, the cooking, the serving, all for a few dollars in profit. Every night when her legs were numb with exhaustion, her only comfort was the clink of coins in an old tin box. That box was her ticket out, her dream of returning to university. It was the only light keeping her going in this harsh reality. One quiet afternoon, while Amara was scrubbing dishes out front, a chill ran down her spine. She felt eyes watching her from the shadows. She looked up and froze. On a weathered wooden bench sat a tiny, huddled figure, a young girl heartbreakingly thin. Her floral dress was so faded the pattern had vanished. Her plastic sandals were worn through, revealing toes stained with mud. The child sat perfectly still, but her tiny hands on her knees wouldn't stop trembling. Amara watched her. The girl took a deep, shaky breath, inhaling the aroma of the soup wafting from the kitchen. Her large, dark eyes stayed glued to the ground, filled with a crushing sense of shame and fear. This child is starving, Amara thought. Her heart tightened. Memories of 11 years in an orphanage hit her like a storm. Amara saw her 5-year-old self again, curled in a dark room, clutching her stomach as it cramped from hunger. She remembered chewing bitter grass in the schoolyard just to trick her appetite. The sob caught in her throat as she watched older kids steal the last piece of bread. The pain of being abandoned wasn't just the empty stomach. It was the terrifying silence of the world around you. Amara knelt on the dusty ground, bringing herself level with the child. She looked into those wide, dull eyes. "Hello," she said softly. "I'm Amara. What's your name?" The girl flinched, her frail shoulders tensed. Slowly, she looked up. Her lips were dry and peeling. It took a long time before a whisper finally escaped. I'm Maya." "Maya," Amara repeated with her warmest smile. "Why are you sitting here all alone? Are you waiting for someone?" Maya looked down. Her hands gripped the hem of her faded dress. A breeze carried the scent of chicken soup from the kitchen. Immediately, her empty stomach let out a loud, traitorous growl. Maya's face turned red. Her shoulders shook with shame. She bit her lip, fighting the urge to run. But she couldn't take it anymore. "Miss," she choked out, I'm so hungry." Those 2 words hit Amara like a ton of lead. She saw the purple tint on Maya's lips, the trembling that wouldn't stop. Without another word, Amara rushed into the kitchen. Minutes later, she returned with a bowl of steaming chicken soup, packed with meat and vegetables, and a cold glass of orange juice. The scent was overwhelming. Maya's hands reached out for the spoon. But then she froze. An image flashed in her mind. Her mother, Gloria, pale, gasping for air in that dark room. Maya's hand stopped in midair. She looked at the soup, then down the road leading back home. A war was raging inside her small chest. She was desperate to eat, but the fear of losing her mother was stronger than her hunger. Maya looked up at Amara, her eyes pleading. "Miss, do you have a plastic bag?" Amara blinked. "A plastic bag? What for? Eat while it's hot." Maya clutched the bowl tight, as if afraid it would be taken away. I want to bring it to my mom. She's sick. She can't walk. She's been hungry for so long. If I eat it all then tonight, she will." She couldn't finish the sentence. Hot tears began to fall into the soup. This child was standing on the edge of survival, but she chose her mother over herself. The words hit Amara like a physical blow, a 6-year-old carrying the weight of the world. Amara took the girl's cold hands. "Is she home alone?" Maya nodded through her sobs. Amara stood up and marched back into the shop. She packed the largest portion of rice. She had added fruit and biscuits and tucked them into a sturdy bag. She placed the heavy bag in Maya's hands. "This," Amara said firmly, "is for your mother. But the soup, you have to sit here and eat every last drop. Listen to me, Maya. You can't take care of her if your stomach is empty. You have to be strong for her. Do you understand?" Maya looked at the bag, then at Amara. The hesitation vanished. "Thank you. Thank you so much." She closed her eyes and ate, savoring every tiny bite. As the warmth spread, the cramps in her stomach finally eased. To her, this wasn't just a meal. It was a miracle. "I wish Mom was eating this right now," she thought. A small smile appeared on her lips. But that peace didn't last. 3 shadows fell over the ground. Loud, ugly laughter rang out. "Look, the dirty beggar dog snuck back in." The leader, a boy clutching an expensive toy car, pointed at her. They surrounded her bench, eyes filled with disgust. "Why are you sitting here eating someone's leftovers, you dirty dog?" Maya froze. The soup turned to ash in her mouth. She kept her eyes on her worn-out sandals. The shame burned her throat. She wanted to tell them she wasn't a dog. She was just trying to save her mom. But she was too choked up to speak. When they reached out to grab the bag of food meant for her mother, Maya panicked. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She curled her small body over the bag, hugging it to her chest with everything she had. "Hit me if you want," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But please, don't take this. Mom is waiting. She'll die without it." Amara's blood boiled. She stepped out and stood in front of the girl like a wall of steel. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice wasn't a scream. It was cold, sharp. The leader flinched. We were just telling the truth." "The truth?" Amara stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "The truth is that you're using expensive clothes to hide a rotten soul. The truth is you think bullying a child smaller than you makes you special." The group went pale. "Go home," Amara hissed. "Tell your parents they should teach you how to be human before they teach you how to spend money. Get out before I call the police." They turned and ran. Silence returned, a warm silence. Amara knelt and smoothed Maya's hair. "They're gone. Don't be afraid. From now on, no one is allowed to hurt you. Do you hear me? No one." The dam finally broke. Maya wailed, her thin shoulders shaking. It was the cry of a soul that had finally found safety. She wiped her eyes, clutched her treasure, and looked at Amara with pure gratitude. "I have to go back now. Mom is all alone. I'm so worried." "Thank you, Miss Amara." Amara's promise became a warm beam of light guiding Maya through each passing day. She was no longer a wandering soul. Every morning, after pressing her ear against her mother's chest to make sure that fragile heart was still beating, Maya would race eagerly toward the little diner. One morning, as the crowd of customers began to thin, the sound of clattering plates echoed through a cloud of thick white soap suds. Amara stood at the sink, her shoulders slumped with the weight of a long, exhausting day. Suddenly, she felt a gentle tug on the hem of her apron. She looked down and met Maya's dark, crystal-clear eyes. "Miss Amara, let me help you." Amara offered a soft smile, her calloused hand gently stroking the girl's messy hair. "Go rest, little one. This sink is taller than you are. How could you possibly reach?" Without a word, the girl turned away. Amara heard the slow screech of a wooden chair dragging across the floor. Maya climbed onto it, rolling up her tattered sleeves to her elbows, revealing arms as thin and frail as dry twigs. She picked up a sponge and began scrubbing a ceramic bowl with terrifying focus. Her tiny hands moved the dish with grace, meticulously cleaning every single edge. Watching the child work, rhythmic, skilled, and silent, Amara felt a sharp ache in her chest. "Maya, when did you learn to do this?" Amara asked, her voice trembling. Maya didn't look up. Her eyes remained fixed on the flowing water. "Since Mommy couldn't get up anymore. If I don't do it, the house gets very dirty. I have to wash the clothes and cook the porridge too. But sometimes I burn it because the pot is just too heavy." Hot tears suddenly welled up in Amara's eyes. She didn't want the girl to see her cry, so she took a deep breath and flicked a bit of soap foam onto Maya's tiny nose. The girl froze her eyes wide with confusion for a few seconds, and then she burst into a bright, ringing laugh. Amara took a small plastic ring and blew. Glistening soap bubbles reflecting the golden afternoon sun began to float through the smoky kitchen. Maya chased them with her thin arms, her laughter echoing through the room, washing away the bitterness of their lives. "Please, Lord," Amara prayed silently, watching the small shadow leap among the fragile bubbles. "Just let her be a child for a little while longer." From that day on, the little diner had a special employee. Maya swept the yard, stacked the plates, and wiped the tables so clean they could be used as mirrors. Once Amara tried to press a few loose coins into her tiny palm, but Maya pulled her hand back as if she had been burned. She took a step back, her lips pressed tight, her eyes showing a wisdom far beyond her years. "I won't take money, Miss Amara. You feed me and Mommy every day. That is more than enough. I want to help you, so I don't feel like a leech." Hearing the word leech from the mouth of a 6-year-old child left Amara stunned. The higher the girl's pride, the deeper the pain in Amara's heart. Amara gently asked about her old school. Maya's eyes suddenly went dark as she looked toward the end of the long, winding street. "I loved school. The teacher said I was smart, but I think I've forgotten my letters now. We don't have books at home, only Mommy's medicine bottles." Amara gripped her hand, trying to pour all her strength into the girl. "I promise you one day you will hold a book in your hands again. I promise." "Does your mother, is she in a lot of pain?" Amara asked, her voice full of worry. Maya stopped wiping the table. Her shoulders began to shake. "Mommy's heart beats so strangely," she whispered. "Sometimes it's so fast, like it wants to jump out of her chest. But other times, she just lies there so still. Her face turns purple and she won't answer me no matter how much I call. I have to count her heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. I'm just so scared it will stop in the middle." The girl broke down, burying her face in Amara's shoulder. Tears that had been held back for so long soaked into Amara's sleeve. Amara held her tight, feeling the frantic, racing heart of this poor, suffering child. "Can you take me to see her? I have a few things for her." Maya looked up, her red eyes filled with surprise. "My house, it's very dirty. It's not beautiful like your diner." "I don't need a beautiful house, Maya. I need to see your mother." That afternoon, Amara carried a bag filled with food and vitamin supplies, bought with the meager savings from her tin box. 2 silhouettes, one large and one small, disappeared into the winding alleys where the sunlight seemed too afraid to visit. Finally, a crumbling, desolate building appeared before them. Amara stepped over the broken threshold. Immediately, a thick stench of mold and decay hit her, making her chest tighten with shock. The light from outside, no matter how bright, could only feebly pierce the cracks in the rotting walls, illuminating dust motes dancing in the freezing air. "How can a human being live here?" Amara whispered to herself, her hands gripping the food bag until her knuckles turned white. Amidst the ruin, Maya moved with heartbreaking familiarity. She wasn't ashamed. She quickly took the hem of her worn-out dress and scrubbed a rotting wooden crate, the only thing in the room that could serve as a seat. She looked at Amara with worried eyes. "Please sit here, Miss Amara. I've wiped it clean. Don't worry about your clothes getting dirty." Then she carefully brought out a stained white ceramic cup. The single remaining handle was cradled in her hands like a precious jewel. Maya wiped it over and over with a small cloth, poured a little water from a plastic bottle, and offered it with both hands. She stared at Amara, waiting as if asking, "Please don't hate my home." Amara felt a wave of grief rise in her throat. She didn't drink. She just stared at that chipped handle, a symbol of kindness and dignity from a child raised in the depths of misery. Amara's gaze shifted to the thin mattress on the cold floor. Gloria lay there motionless. Her pale skin seemed to be glued to her bones. Her purple lips trembled when she realized they had a guest. Suddenly, a surge of power, the raw instinct of a mother, flamed up in that withered body. Gloria struggled, her bone-dry hands gripping the edge of the mattress as she forced herself to sit up. "Hello, ma'am. I'm Amara. Maya has told me so much about you." Amara knelt beside her, her voice breaking. Gloria looked at Amara. Her dull, lifeless eyes suddenly sparked with a final light of gratitude. She slowly reached out her cold, trembling hand and squeezed Amara's. "You are Amara, the one who fed my child, who protected her." Her voice was a mere thread, every word accompanied by a violent shudder in her chest. Amara could only bow her head, her tears falling onto the poor woman's hand. I only did what any human being should do. Gloria used the last of her strength to pull herself into a kneeling position. She clasped her withered hands together facing Amara. Her eyes were flooded with tears, but her gaze was terrifyingly desperate. "Amara, I am so poor, and I have no more time." She sobbed, tears carving paths through the deep lines of her face. "I will pray for you every single day, every night, until my very last breath. I will ask the Lord to remember you, for you did not turn your back on us when the rest of the world did." Gloria fought through a sharp pain in her chest, her voice becoming a pleading whisper. "I am not afraid of death. I am only afraid that this little one will have no one left. Amara, I beg of you, if the day comes that I am gone, please have mercy and take her in. Don't let her be alone. I beg you." "Mommy, what are you saying?" Maya's cry cut through the plea. She had been standing against the wall, but now she rushed over, collapsing beside her mother. Her tiny hands frantically grabbed Gloria's shoulders, shaking her as if trying to wake her from a nightmare. "You aren't going to die. You can't say that!" Maya screamed, large tears rolling down her dusty cheeks. "You promised me. You said when I grow up, you would take me to see the flower gardens. You'll be with me forever. Right? Right, Miss Amara?" Maya looked at Amara with a desperate burning hunger for hope. "Tell her, Miss Amara, Mommy isn't going anywhere, is she?" Amara's throat felt like it was filled with ash. She looked at the child trembling with fear, and then at the mother who was breaking her own heart by lying to her daughter. Gloria reached out a skeletal hand, stroking the girl's hair, her purple lips moving without sound. Amara couldn't take it anymore. She pulled them both into a tight embrace. In the darkness of that ruined building, the cries of three souls merged into one painful, raw, and suffocating. Maya buried her head in Amara's chest, her small shoulders heaving. She kept repeating through her tears like a prayer to the heavens, "Mommy won't die. She's going to stay." That night, Amara lay in her cramped room, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling. She didn't cry. She just lay there, listening to the distant traffic and the sound of the leaky faucet dripping in the kitchen. She thought of her own mother. She thought of the orphanage. She thought of the nights she was too hungry to sleep. She closed her eyes and eventually drifted off. In her dreams, she saw Maya laughing, her hand still clutching a lucky coin, like a treasure that could never be lost. 3 days later, the tragedy arrived without warning. Maya burst into the diner, her face white as a sheet, her voice lost to panic. "Miss Amara, Mommy fainted. She's not breathing." Amara dropped her towel and sprinted toward the ruins. Gloria lay motionless on the cold cement, her face a deep shade of purple. Her heartbeat was as fragile as a candle in a storm. Amara frantically performed CPR, her sweat and tears falling onto the poor woman's chest. "Wake up! Don't leave her! She only has you!" The siren of the ambulance tore through the air, carrying them away into the night. At the hospital, the doctor emerged with a heavy gaze, delivering a death sentence to their last hope. "The heart valve is completely destroyed. She needs an immediate transplant, and the cost is at least several $100,000. Without it, she won't last 3 months." Several $100,000. Amara was frozen. That number was a mountain that crushed the poor soup seller. She stood rooted to the spot, feeling small and utterly helpless. But in the middle of that despair, Maya stepped forward. She wasn't crying. She gripped the sleeve of the doctor's white coat and looked up with red, determined eyes. She asked a question that made everyone's heart stop. "Doctor, is several $100,000 more than $10?" The doctor stood still. Maya hurriedly opened her tiny calloused hands, showing him her meager savings. "I wash dishes very well. I sweep the floors too. Please save my mommy. I will work for you forever. I will pay you back slowly. Please don't let her die." The innocent bargain of a 6-year-old child felt like a knife to the heart of every adult in the room. The doctor turned his face away quickly, wiping a tear from his eye. He could fight against death, but against the cruel laws of money and the massive love of a destitute child, he was completely powerless. At 40,000 feet, enveloped in the absolute silence of first class, David Mitchell sat motionless, a statue carved from solitude. The glass of red wine on the polished wood table remained untouched, reflecting the face of a man who held a billion-dollar empire in his hands, yet wore the hollow eyes of a pauper. David pressed his forehead against the cold airplane window. Below him lay a pitch-black void identical to that fateful night 7 years ago. The memory rushed back without warning, sharp as a knife. That night, poor student David was walking back to his dorm, smiling as he rehearsed the sweet words he planned to say to Gloria. Then darkness fell, a brutal punch, the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. But the most terrifying moment wasn't the physical pain. It was watching the muggers snatch his cheap old phone and vanish into the night. Waking up in a sterile white hospital, David realized he had lost everything. No money, no ID. And, tragically, he hadn't memorized Gloria's number. The single thread connecting two people across an ocean was ruthlessly severed in a second. David looked down at his hands, now adorned with a Patek Philippe watch worth a fortune. These same hands had once been cracked and blistered from soaking in dishwater at cheap restaurants for 3 years, earning pennies to fuel a startup dream. People saw him working like a madman. But no one knew that the only motivation dragging him out of the mud wasn't fame. He needed money. He needed power. He needed to become a man no one could ever trample on again, just so he would have the strength to tear the world apart to find her. "Wait for me, Gloria," David whispered, his breath fogging the glass. "I have the whole world in my hands now, but it's meaningless without you. I'm coming home." The plane sliced through the clouds, carrying a successful man with a scarred heart, betting everything to find the only missing piece of his life. But as he stepped onto the street, the smile on David's lips faded. The Atlanta of 7 years later was cruelly unfamiliar. Glossy glass skyscrapers stood like heartless giants, devouring the moss-covered streets where he used to date. Breathing heavily, he sprinted toward the old apartment complex. Click. The rotting wooden door creaked open. A stranger looked at him with eyes full of suspicion and exhaustion. David tried to force a smile, but his lips were dry and stiff. "Excuse me? I'm looking for Gloria Johnson. Does she still live in this room?" The woman didn't answer. She swept a cold glance over David's expensive suit, then shook her head firmly. The door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the dark hallway like a bucket of ice water thrown against his heart. David stood frozen, his trembling hands gripping the damp cement wall. "Gloria, where are you?" He searched every alley, frantically asking every old neighbor, every grocery store clerk. But the only answer he received was indifferent waves of the hand. The world seemed to have wiped away every trace of the woman he loved. Just as David felt he was about to collapse, a trembling voice called out from behind. "David, is that the David from years ago?" He spun around. An old woman with silver hair squinted at him through cloudy eyes. David rushed over, grasping her skeletal hands, his voice hoarse and desperate. "Yes, it's me, ma'am. Where is Gloria now? I beg you. Do you know where she is?" The old woman looked at David's luxurious appearance, then sighed a long sigh, carrying the weight of 7 years of pity. "Poor girl. You had been gone a few months when she found out she was pregnant. She gave birth to a daughter. She looks just like you, David." David felt his entire body freeze. A shockwave ran down his spine, making it impossible to stand. "A daughter? You said." "I have a daughter." He stammered, his eyes widening in horror and shock. "Gloria had my child." The old woman nodded. "She had severe heart disease. No money for medicine, no money for rent. Finally, they threw her and the baby's things out onto the street in the middle of a winter night. Since then, no one has seen her. Some say they saw the mother and daughter living in the abandoned buildings on the outskirts." Thud. David's heart felt like it exploded. He fell to his knees on the filthy ground, his broad shoulders shaking violently beneath the high-end suit. He looked down at the watch worth tens of thousands of dollars on his wrist, a cold piece of metal ticking away indifferent seconds. "What have you done, David?" His fist smashed into the dry concrete. "For 7 years you were busy making money, so that now your wife and child have to cower in a dark corner. You have hundreds of millions of dollars, but you couldn't buy a bowl of hot soup for them when they were thrown onto the street." David looked up, his face blurred with tears, sobbing in the middle of the crowded street. His wealth suddenly felt cruelly ironic. He felt like a victor standing on the ashes of his own happiness. "I came back too late," he screamed, the sound choking in his throat into a gut-wrenching wail. "Gloria, my child, I'm so sorry." The streetlights flickered on, casting the shadow of a successful man, kneeling in despair, realizing that the most brilliant glory of his life was the very thing that cost him what mattered most. From that day on, David began a frantic crusade. He abandoned luxury hotels to wade into the darkest slums, the most cramped and foul-smelling shelters. He printed thousands of flyers, plastered them on every street corner, and offered huge rewards for any information. David even began donating massive sums to hospitals and charities specializing in heart disease. He did it with a fierce belief that if Gloria was out there somewhere, if she was suffering, these donations might accidentally help her. A week passed in hopeless silence. That morning, David decided to personally visit a small hospital on the outskirts of the city to donate high-end medical equipment. It was also an excuse to follow a thin lead about a black woman with a heart condition who was rumored to have stayed there. Under the blazing midday sun of the suburbs driven by hunger, David's luxury car came to an unexpected halt in front of a dilapidated roadside diner. Inside, the place was deserted. David intended to eat quickly and leave, but the owner's strange behavior gave him pause. Amara didn't greet him. She was scrubbing a table with aggressive, jittery movements, as if trying to sand away her anxiety into the wood. Every few seconds, she checked the clock, then ran to the door, eyes glued to the empty road, looking like she was standing on hot coals. When she saw David enter instead of a welcome, her face showed clear disappointment and annoyance, as if he were an uninvited guest arriving at the worst possible time. The luxury car parked out front created a stark contrast to the humble surroundings. David stepped out, adjusted his suit collar, and walked in slowly. The diner was tiny, with just a few old wooden tables, but everything was spotless. In the open kitchen, a young black woman with a kind face was busy over steaming pots of soup. It was Amara. David stepped inside. The silence was broken only by the tired creak of the ceiling fan. Amara didn't stand at the counter. She continued her aggressive scrubbing, almost stripping the varnish off the table. Again, she looked at the wall clock, then rushed to the door to scan the deserted street. Seeing David, she couldn't hide her frustration. "The diner is about to close, sir. You can go to the shop across the street," Amara said quickly, her hands already untying her apron. David frowned. It was clearly only 6 p.m. Exhausted, he pulled out a chair and sat down, his voice low but firm. "I just need 10 minutes. A plate of hot rice. I've been traveling all day." Amara bit her lip, a heavy sigh escaping her. She reluctantly nodded. "Fine. Please wait a moment." She served the food minutes later, slamming the plate down so hurriedly that sauce spilled over the edge. Instead of wishing him a good meal, she turned her back immediately, leaning against the doorframe, her foot tapping a frantic rhythm against the floor, her eyes burning a hole into the street outside. David picked up his spoon, but the girl's anxiety made it impossible to swallow. A mix of curiosity and irritation bubbled up. "Are you trying to chase me out?" David asked, unable to hide the sarcasm. "Or are you waiting for a boyfriend?" Amara spun around, her eyes red, her voice cracking with worry. "No, I'm sorry, sir. I'm waiting for a child, a 6-year-old girl. Every day at this time she comes to help me wash dishes in exchange for food for her mother. But it's been 3 days, and I haven't seen a shadow of her." David froze. The spoon in his hand hovered in midair. The image of a child working for food made his bleeding heart skip a beat in sympathy. "Is her mother sick?" he asked, his voice softening. "Her mother has severe congenital heart disease. They live like rats in that abandoned building over in the outskirts." Amara pointed into the distance, her voice choking up. "People say she was abandoned by her husband, raising the child alone in poverty. I'm scared. If something happens to the mother, I don't know how that little girl will survive." Clang! The spoon slipped from David's hand, hitting the ceramic plate with a piercing sound. Fragments of data began to swirl in his mind like a tornado. Congenital heart disease. Abandoned building. A 6-year-old daughter. The coincidence was terrifying. David's chest began to heave, his breathing becoming labored. He tried to calm himself, telling himself there were thousands of unfortunate women in the world. "The mother?" David asked, his voice trembling, raspy like grinding gravel. "What is her name?" Amara looked at the strange customer who had suddenly gone pale, but she answered, "Her name is Gloria." A poor, wretched woman. The name Gloria hit David like a sledgehammer. His vision went dark. He gripped the edge of the table to keep from collapsing, but his reason still clung to one last fragile thread of hope that this wasn't real. "Gloria, is it Gloria Johnson?" He screamed, the sound shattering in his throat. Amara stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. How do you know her last name?" David didn't answer. He staggered up, lunging forward to grab Amara's shoulders, his eyes bloodshot, tears streaming down his face. "Tell me! Does she have a small mole under her left eye? Does she cover her mouth with her hand when she laughs? And the daughter, does she have eyes exactly like mine?" Amara stood frozen. She looked at the man's face, then recalled the features of little Maya. The resemblance was uncanny. She stammered, You are... David collapsed. The man in the expensive suit, the owner of the luxury car, fell to his knees on the dirty floor of the poor diner, weeping like a child. It was the cry of belated regret of pain that pierced the soul. "I am her husband. I am the father of that child." David pounded his chest right where his heart was being torn apart. "Oh God, what have I done?" He looked up, grasping Amara's hand like a drowning man clutching a lifeline. "Take me to them, please, take me to them right now." Amara snapped out of her shock. She didn't ask another question. She threw her towel onto the table and shouted, "Let's go, they are at the hospital." The doctor said if they don't have money for surgery tonight, she won't make it. David bolted out the door like a wounded animal, leaving behind the untouched plate of rice, a meal he would never be able to swallow for the rest of his life. When the car screeched to a halt in front of the hospital, David was the first to jump out. He sprinted into the main lobby, Amara struggling to keep up. They stopped in front of a shabby room reserved for uninsured patients. David froze before the slightly ajar door. His hand trembled as it touched the handle, his courage failing him. David stood at the threshold, his chest tightening in spasms. He walked in, not with the posture of a chairman, but of a sinner finding his way home. Click, click. The sound of expensive leather shoes on the tile floor echoed dryly, waking the woman on the bed. Gloria slowly opened her eyes. Her lashes fluttered. When her gaze landed on the man standing stunned at the foot of her bed, her pupils dilated, then contracted violently. "David." A whisper escaped, fragile as smoke. David dropped to his knees, his kneecaps slamming against the cold tiles. He crawled forward, his shaking hands grasping her skeletal hand. "Gloria, it's me. I'm back. I'm really back." In a split second, the shock on Gloria's face vanished, replaced by a tsunami of hatred. She snatched her hand away as if she had touched fire. "Get out!" She grabbed the water cup on the table and hurled it at him. Crash glass, shattered water splashing all over his expensive suit. "Mom!" Maya screamed, startled. She backed away in fear, eyes wide, watching her mother transform into a wounded beast. Gloria forced herself up her chest, heaving violently, every breath hissing like a saw. "How dare you? How dare you show your face here 7 years? Where the hell were you for 7 years?" David ignored the glass shards digging into his knees. He lunged forward. "Gloria, listen to me. I didn't abandon you. I had an accident." "Liar!" Gloria screamed. She flailed, throwing a pillow, a tissue box, anything she could grab at him. "Look at me. Look at your child. We live in hell while you wear a suit, a gold watch, and come here to hand out pity. Mom, Mommy, go away." Maya rushed in, her tiny fists pounding against David's chest. "You're a bad man. You hurt Mommy. I hate you." David sat there motionless as a statue, letting his daughter's punches rain down on him. He felt no physical pain. He only felt his heart being shredded into pieces. Doctors and nurses rushed in. Amara quickly pulled Maya back, but the girl's eyes, filled with hatred, remained locked on him. Amara stepped forward. She looked at the powerful man cowering in agony, then at the woman trying to build a wall of ice. She approached the bed and placed a hand on Gloria's shoulder. "Miss Gloria, I know you're in pain, but please, look at his hands." Gloria frowned slightly, glancing down. David's hands, the hands of a chairman, were covered in old scars. A long scar ran down the back of his hand. Thick calluses marred the skin. "That night," David spoke, his voice hoarse and broken, "the robbers crushed my skull. I had severe brain trauma. I lay in a coma for a long time. I lost my phone, lost all my ID, and in my pain, I couldn't remember your number." He looked up, his bloodshot eyes staring straight into her soul. "I washed dishes. I carried heavy loads. I did everything just to survive. Every penny I earned, I told myself, this is to buy medicine for Gloria. I turned this entire city upside down, but I was one step too late." Gloria slowly turned back. She looked into his eyes, dark circles framing the pain of 7 long years. No lie could exist in that gaze of despair. You really looked for me." Her voice trembled. Amara spoke up, her voice choked with emotion. "Miss Gloria, he cried like a child in my diner when he heard your name. If he wanted to abandon you for wealth, he wouldn't be kneeling here right now." A single tear rolled down Gloria's cheek. The wall of ice in her heart began to crack. She reached out a thin hand, gently touching the long scar on David's hand. "Did it hurt?" she whispered. David grabbed her hand, pressing it against his cheek, tears pouring out. "Not as much as letting you two suffer. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Their cries merged, washing away 7 years of resentment. Maya, who had been hiding behind Amara, timidly stepped forward. She looked at the man sobbing beside her mother, then at her mother smiling through tears. Gloria beckoned to her daughter. "Maya, come here." The girl stepped closer, her big eyes confused. Gloria took her hand and placed it into David's large, calloused palm. "Do you remember how you always asked where Daddy was? Daddy didn't leave us? He got lost, and now he has found us." Maya stood stunned. She looked at David. David looked at his child. He knelt down so his eyes were level with hers. He didn't dare hug her yet, afraid of scaring her. He just opened his arms, his voice choking. "Hello, daughter. I'm your daddy, David. I'm sorry I came home late." Maya looked deep into the stranger's eyes. In those eyes, she saw her own reflection. The instinct of blood and kin awoke, dissolving all defenses. She bit her lip, then burst into tears, rushing into his arms. "Daddy." Immediately following the reunion, David sprang into action. He was no longer the weeping man on the floor, but the powerful chairman he had become. A phone call was made. A private jet was scrambled. 2 hours later, Dr. Robert Chen, America's top cardiac surgeon, was standing in the hospital. But David's power could not bribe the grim reality. Dr. Chen removed his glasses, delivering a diagnosis as cold as a death sentence. Her heart is functioning at only 30%. Surgery is the only option, but the mortality risk is extremely high. She might never wake up. David froze. He opened his mouth to ask for a safer alternative, but Gloria squeezed his hand, cutting him off. "Do it, doctor. I'd rather gamble my life for a chance to watch my daughter grow up than lie here and rot away." David pulled her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her shoulder, his voice choking. "You are not allowed to give up. You owe me 7 years, Gloria. You have to pay me back in full." That night, in the cold luxury of the VIP suite, the three of them huddled together on a single bed. Maya snuggled into her mother's chest, her tiny finger tracing Gloria's gaunt face. "Promise me, Mom. When you wake up tomorrow, you'll braid my hair. Don't sleep in okay." Gloria swallowed her tears, kissing her daughter's forehead, a promise of life and death. "I promise. I will never leave you again." David wrapped his arms around them, both building a fortress of flesh and bone. That night, 3 hearts beat as one, using the fragile warmth of family to fight the darkness of death, waiting to swallow them at dawn. The pale gray light of dawn had just begun to bleed through the curtains when the squeak of gurney wheels in the hallway signaled 0 hour. The air in the room thickened, tense enough to choke on. Nurses entered efficiently, prepping IV lines. David held Gloria's hand so tight, his knuckles turned white. He walked alongside the gurney, down the long tunnel-like corridor. At the doors of the cold operating theater, the gurney stopped. Gloria tried to lift herself up. She looked at David, then down at Maya, who was clinging to her father's leg, eyes swollen from crying. She wanted to say 1,000 words of love, but her throat was bitter and tight. "David," she whispered, her eyes boring into his soul. If I don't come out, love her twice as much for me." "Don't talk like that." David bent down and kissed her forehead, his tears falling onto her face. "I'll wait for you. We both will. You're just going in for a little while. Remember that." Gloria nodded, a weak but peaceful smile blooming on her lips. She turned to her daughter one last time. "I love you, Maya. You are my miracle." The doors swung shut. The surgery in progress sign blazed red. David and Maya sank onto the row of waiting chairs in the hallway. Amara was there too. She hadn't left for a minute, her hands constantly clasped in prayer. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The clock on the wall ticked off dry seconds, hammering into David's mind like a sledgehammer. 1 hour, 2 hours, then 3. The hospital corridor was long and cold, swallowing all sound except for the restless clack, clack of David's leather shoes pacing the floor. He couldn't sit still. He walked back and forth, wringing his hands until the joints cracked. Every time a door squeaked open, his heart leaped only to sink in disappointment when it wasn't Dr. Chen. On the bench, the little girl sat motionless as a small statue. Her bony hands gripped the hem of her shirt lips, moving in silent prayer. Amara brought over a carton of milk and a pastry, gently touching the girl's shoulder. "Eat a little something." The girl shook her head violently, her eyes glued to the sealed operating room doors as if blinking would make her mother disappear forever. Hour 5. Suddenly, the silence was ripped apart by a piercing sound. A red alarm siren screamed from inside the operating room, penetrating the soundproof walls. The light above the door flashed from green to red, bathing the hallway in the color of blood. David froze. The blood in his veins turned to ice. The doors burst open. A nurse rushed out, her mask askew, forehead drenched in sweat, stumbling in her haste. David lunged at her like a mad beast, grabbing her shoulders, screaming, "What's happening? What is that siren? How is my wife?" The nurse gasped for air, panic in her eyes. "The patient ruptured a collateral vessel. Her heart has stopped. We are resuscitating. Step back. I need to get more blood. Heart has stopped." Those 3 words struck David like lightning. His arms fell to his sides. He stumbled back 2 steps, his back slamming into the cold wall. His world collapsed. The images of 7 years ago of separation, of regret, flooded back to strangle him. He threw himself against the glass partition, separating the observation deck, pounding his fists against it, sliding slowly to the floor. "Gloria, no, you can't do this to me," David howled, tears pouring down, blurring the glass. "Wake up. Don't punish me like this, you promised." Behind him, the little girl stood paralyzed. Her face was paper white, drained of blood. The trauma of all those times her mother fainted in the abandoned house returned, but this time it was 1,000,000 times more terrifying. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. It took several seconds for a heart-wrenching wail to tear from her tiny chest. "Mommy." "Don't leave me, Mommy, wake up." Amara rushed over, hugging the girl tight, burying Maya's head in her chest so she wouldn't see the chaos inside. 3 people, 3 fates collapsed before the door of death. Inside the operating room, the tension was wire-tight. Sweat stung Dr. Chen's eyes, but his hands never stopped compressing the heart. The ECG monitor showed a long, flat line, the line of death. "Defibrillator 200 joules clear," he shouted. Thump. Gloria's frail body jolted on the table, then fell back. Limp, lifeless. "Still no rhythm, charge it faster." Thump. Still that cold flat line. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes passed. The silence in the room was now more terrifying than the siren. The nurses looked at each other, hopeless. "One more time." The whole room held its breath. Every eye was fixed on the green screen. 1 second, 2 seconds. A small blip appeared. "We have a rhythm. Sinus rhythm is back." A nurse cried out, her voice cracking with emotion. Dr. Chen dropped his hands. He let out a long breath, his legs trembling so hard he almost collapsed. He looked at the clock. They had snatched a life back from the Grim Reaper by a hair's breadth. 3 hours later, the heavy doors of the operating room opened for the last time. Dr. Chen stepped out, removing his mask to reveal a gaunt, aged face. David, sitting on the floor with his head between his knees, sprang up like a coiled spring. He didn't dare ask. He just stared into the doctor's eyes, awaiting judgment. Dr. Chen looked at the powerful man, who now looked as ragged as a beggar, and slowly, a tired smile appeared. It was a success. Her heart is beating strongly again. David stood there, stunned for a few seconds. Then, like a tower with its foundation removed, he collapsed to the floor. He covered his face, sobbing like a baby. Not tears of pain, but tears of release, of a 1,000-pound weight being lifted. Hearing this, Maya's swollen eyes lit up. She jumped up, turning to Amara. "Miss Amara, Mom is alive. My mom is alive." Amara leaned against the wall, watching the scene. Tears silently rolled down her cheeks, salty but sweet. She looked up at the stark white ceiling, whispering, "Thank you, God. Thank you for making miracles real." Under the care of a top-tier medical team, Gloria's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. 1 month later, she walked out of the hospital gates, inhaling the air of freedom deep into her lungs. The luxury car brought them to a halt in front of a magnificent villa in the suburbs. Gloria stood rooted to the spot, her trembling hands unable to believe her eyes. "Our home," David said, holding her hand tight, his gaze steady. "I bought it 2 years ago, just waiting for the day to bring you back." While Maya cheered and vanished inside to explore her dream room, Gloria stepped timidly into the living room. She touched the soft leather sofa, the pristine white walls without a single spot of mold. The luxury was so alien, it frightened her. "David, am I dreaming? I'm afraid I'll wake up back in the ruins." David hugged her tight from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "It's not a dream." The nightmare is over. This is reality, a home to make up for every hardship you had to endure. When life had finally stabilized, David returned to the small diner, not as a customer, but as a man who owed a debt. He looked at Amara cleaning in her old apron, his eyes shining with respect. Amara, you didn't just save Maya. You saved the soul of my entire family. When the whole world chose to close its eyes, only you opened your arms. Amara waved her hand in embarrassment, her gentle smile still on her lips. I just gave a child a meal, Mr. David. Anyone would have done the same. David smiled and shook his head. He placed a thick folder and a shiny key on the table. No, Amara. Kindness is not a given. It is a choice. And this is my choice for you. Amara opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were admission papers to a prestigious University of Economics along with a full scholarship. But what left her stunned was the deed to a business premise located in the busiest district of Atlanta named Amara's Kitchen. I have hired a professional management team to run this place for you, David said, his voice deep and warm. The profits will help you live comfortably so you can focus wholeheartedly on getting the college degree you always dreamed of. Amara stood frozen. She looked down at her hands calloused from grease and labor, then at the gift on the table. The dream of going back to school, the dream of changing her life that she thought was buried forever, was now right before her eyes. Tears welled up uncontrollable. She sobbed aloud like a child. David patted her shoulder, leaving her with one final thought. Don't cry, niece. You deserve all of this. Remember, when you plant a single seed of kindness, life will return to you an entire forest of flowers. 6 months later, David and Gloria held their wedding. It wasn't too big nor too lavish. Only the closest people were there, Amara, a few friends, and of course Maya. Maya wore a pink bridesmaid dress holding a small bouquet standing next to her mother. She looked at her mom in a pristine white wedding dress, then at her dad in a sharp black suit, and her smile was more radiant than ever. When David and Gloria exchanged rings and kissed, applause erupted alongside happy tears. The family that seemed shattered 7 years ago was now whole again. 15 years later, in a sun-drenched office at a top international hospital, Dr. Maya Mitchell leaned back in her chair after a heart surgery that had lasted many hours. On her pristine white coat, the words "cardiologist" sparkled proof of her extraordinary effort. Maya wasn't just a skilled doctor, she was the founder of the Mitchell Heart Foundation, which had saved thousands of poor patients unable to pay hospital fees, just as she had wished since the days she wandered the streets. Maya's gaze paused on a small framed photo on her desk. In the picture, Maya smiled brightly beside Amara in front of a large restaurant named Amara's Kitchen. The street vendor from years ago had become a successful businesswoman and the owner of a restaurant chain that provided free meals to the homeless across the state. Amara still wore that gentle smile and kind look, the light that had saved Maya's life during her darkest years. Looking at the photo, Maya saw her old self, a thin girl with dirty hands holding a hot bowl of soup amidst gnawing hunger. Maya told herself that kindness is never lost. It is like a seed sown in barren soil, waiting for the day to bloom into a lush green forest. One bowl of soup from Amara 15 years ago didn't just save a child, it saved a future so that today thousands of other hearts could continue to beat. The story of Maya's family and the quiet kindness of Amara has become a priceless lesson gently seeping into our hearts. It reminds us that no matter how harsh or stormy life gets, the most important thing is to keep kindness in our core, to face challenges without losing ourselves to the pressures of reality. And you, after listening to this tearful yet warm journey, do you believe in the power of a small act of kindness? Have you ever received a heartwarming bowl of soup in your most desperate moment? Or have you ever been the one to give hope to someone else? Please leave your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below so we can warm each other with good things. If you feel this story brought a little peace and meaning to your day, don't forget to click like, share this video with friends, and subscribe to the channel. Every small action from you helps us spread these positive values and love to even more people. Thank you for always being here, listening, and walking with us on this journey of planting kindness. Wishing you a truly peaceful day.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.